we have to talk, and this time around we have to talk about cheating. Or can you really call it cheating in the smartphone world? Smartphones like the Vivo X200 Ultra, like the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max, and others are known that they were cheating in the past by using special software optimizations. We know it from the diesel scandal with cars where they optimized for diesel tests. The same way smartphones are optimizing for benchmark tests. So if a benchmark is detected, they are destroying or circumventing all the thermal limits, all the performance limits that the smartphones usually have to provide very high frame rates. But this is an already known issue, and some phones have a high performance mode as well that they might trigger by accident or automatically when you start a benchmark. But this is not the point here. This is already a known thing. But what is a bit lesser known or unknown is the fact that the smartphone manufacturers are explicitly cheating with review devices. What are review devices? Review devices are devices that either ship early on or later on when the device is already out to reviewers like me, for example, or MKBHD, Mr. Who's the Boss, or others who are getting review devices. Be sure not everyone is getting review devices. This one here is a retail unit. I bought it by myself, but we get sometimes review units. And those review units, as it turns out, especially when they come from China, but not only exclusively from China, but there's been a vast amount of devices analyzed, 44 devices actually analyzed by a Chinese YouTuber. I just call him YouTuber, it's an influencer. He's releasing videos on Bilibili that analyzed 44 different smartphones, including iPhones and I think even Samsung phones, and caught basically all of them cheating besides iPhones. So Apple is the only one that is not really cheating. How are they cheating? How did they test it? First of all, they got a review unit. So something that the manufacturer sends them for free for a special amount of time, or sometimes even a loaner device that has like indefinite loaning. So they basically keep it forever, but officially are not allowed to sell it. And the other thing is a retail unit. And they put them side by side. Let's grab another phone that you can get what I mean here. This looks pretty much identical, no? This is the X200 Ultra, X100 Ultra. They put them side by side and then they do some benchmark tests. Not only one benchmark test, but multiple benchmark tests to see what the trend shows. And the trend clearly shows that the review units are far better in terms of benchmarks than the retail units. Far better, meaning not only the frame rate is better, but the sustained frame rate for a longer time is better. The thermal threshold is slightly better. That means that they keep cooler. They can keep this coolness for a longer time with the frame rate for a longer time, plus using less power than the retail unit. So whatever they do with those review devices, they put some extra care on them. It cannot be software alone. I think they sometimes do even hardware tweaks. And there are a few things from the past where I can recall already what happened. Like DxOMark is famous for some camera tests, just like I am, hopefully. They did several camera reviews, and one unit in particular, very interesting for me, was I think the Mate 50 Pro. I think this one here got the good rank in DxOMark. I think top #1 or something like this. And in the written article, they were writing about this device. Or was it a P60 Pro? They were writing this one here has a 1/1.2 inch sized sensor. And nope, it never had this sensor. I was expecting it to be a little bit larger than the 101.5 that everyone was expecting. Some people were like taking it apart, 101.5, but the aperture did not, the bokeh did not match somehow, and the aperture was not, anyway, maybe it's slightly bigger. Maybe they have different variants, maybe they put different sensors in. But what is the interesting part is here that DxOMark got the device way earlier than everyone else got the device. So, and the praise of the camera was so high, especially the main camera sensor, and them writing it down. It's not only the first time that it happened, different camera specs than to what the retail unit actually had made me believe, at least, I'm not sure some people as well maybe, that the review unit just shipped with different hardware. It shipped with a different main camera sensor that was probably larger and was from Sony instead of OmniVision. And that's not the only thing that was different. And I think this was like also around the P50 Pro lineup back then. They also had two different CPUs. They had a Kirin variant with the Kirin CPU, 5G support, and that a Qualcomm variant, Snapdragon, with only 4G support. And of course the Qualcomm variant was very poorly optimized because Huawei put all their efforts, their image processing pipeline into the Kirin CPUs. They had different chips optimized and different algorithms optimized directly baked into hardware. So of course they sent the Kirin variant to DxOMark and not the Qualcomm variant, even though then it was either software side, they wrote, yeah, it's the Snapdragon variant, even though it wasn't, or it was clearly the Kirin variant and DxOMark just went with it and thought this is the retail unit. But it was clearly performing completely different in the camera tests than the real world with the retail units. And so it's not a new thing that we hear here, but on this large kind of scale that now 44 different smartphones were tested from different brands, amongst them Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, Honor, interestingly enough not Huawei, makes me believe that this is a common thing, common practice. This I don't even know if I have a retail unit currently here that I can show you, but usually you have like a not for sale sticker put on the back of the phone, so you know that's a retail unit. And yes, they're behaving differently, sometimes with beta software, because you get it very, very early and the global version is not finished yet, and sometimes you get even software updates. And I remember Honor at one point, I think I'm allowed to say that, even wiped the whole device at one point. Instead of like pushing a normal update, they wiped the whole device and installed a completely new operating system. So all test shots and everything that was not backed up on external SSD was gone, and you had to restart the whole test, which was like fun, especially for those influencers who had to work on a schedule there. But yeah, super interesting. And yeah, the most interesting thing is Apple was not caught cheating, and now there's like two reasons why that is the case. By the way, very nice back, and I like this orange. They had an orange vegan leather of this one as well. Anyway, why was Apple not caught cheating? Not because Apple is a saint, Apple would probably do the same at one point, but because they have a different policy in total. They're just not giving out retail review devices. So the only thing that you can get is a retail unit from Apple, as far as I'm aware. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, MKBHD, Mr. Who's the Boss, and all the other ones. I don't think Apple is sending out review units, so you have to buy the retail version. So you get the same thing as the other ones are getting, basically. And this is the huge difference there. And from one hand, I can of course understand that the smartphone manufacturers want to have a device that shines, that is good, that is like giving more performance and is really convincing the reviewer, let's say it like this, because if the reviewer is convinced, then he can convince you as well. But if the discrepancy is so large that the real world looks completely different, then it's a bit of a different kind of thing. It's not like only we have like, okay, we have like all this heat dissipation management thing not turned so aggressively as we usually would, because we know this reviewer lives in a place where, like Europe, where in winter it's cold. So if we send him this device, we have the thermal threshold maybe, or the thermal rules maybe for aggressively throttling the CPU, maybe put a bit higher there so that the CPU can run at a higher clock speed. Then to a reviewer that we send this device in summer, for example, when we would probably throttle a little bit. This is why it's also super interesting not to always look at the review devices, but at real world tests, like people who are really buying those retail units and testing them and giving you the verdict of them. Especially from another point, I made this video already once, because the software version of the review units that people get sometimes is too early and not optimized enough for battery life tests and so on. But now we have the reverse Uno card that those manufacturers are apparently playing, and they are shipping a highly optimized operating system, maybe even with some hardware tweaks inside, to convince the reviewer that this is a good device, to also, because they know the reviewers are doing benchmarks, be top notch in terms of benchmarks, high score. But when the retail unit is out and has either the same software version or even a newer software version, it never gets to the same kind of scores that you saw in those reviews. This explains it. It is not to a point where I would say, okay, the review says it has like 60 frames per second, and the real world says it has only 40. So 20 frames per second difference. No, it's not. But it can be like 8 to 9, so under 10, like, but above 5 frames per second, where I would say this is not just a discrepancy in terms of how you measure, like the measurement discrepancy here. This is real world differences between a review device and a retail unit. And this is something that also is not only affecting frames per second, but also power consumption, pretty much. So whatever they do, either it's better hardware that they put in, or they test the hardware a bit more thoroughly and optimize it together with the software a bit more thoroughly than they do it on the retail units, where they cannot do that so much. Or it is just simply putting completely different hardware in. Like I said, the Huawei example, I'm not sure if it was the Mate 50 Pro or the P50 Pro, where they apparently for the XOMark sent a completely different phone there, which had the same name, but completely different hardware inside. So the results were spectacular on the XOMark, and the retail unit was like, the discrepancy was very high, and you saw the huge difference there between what the XOMark was testing and what we then got as a retail unit. That's everything for this short little video here. What do you think about manufacturers cheating to such an extent that review units are now more optimized than actually the retail units, especially when it comes to benchmarks, battery life? Write it down in the comments, let me know. Until the next time, bye.